On starry nights, when the moon is full and the air dense as fuck, you can still hear the sounds of splashing and swearing. They echo over the hills and through the valley into other people's windows who weren't fans of the noise. Everyone in the apartment building knows that this is the sound of ChacePlayz hard at work, trying to figure out what the fuck he wants to do with his free time. First, he tried being a famous ventriloquist, unknowing the minds the puppets already had. Then he tried making terrible Minecraft videos. That one didn't stick. Finally, he tried being a food reviewer.
Pretty good. Cheesy.
He tasted all sorts of different cuisines, giving his thoughts afterwards.
Not that cheesy.
Unfortunately, he wasn't very articulate.
Now that's cheesy.
Chase, please stop. At last, he gave up. With no more puff, he sat down, then stood up again, and did the only thing he knew how to do. Yap.
You all knew this was coming.
I've talked about Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, and how it was a surprisingly amazing TV show that was ahead of its time in a lot of ways, and continues to be a program that brings me constant joy even into adulthood. You know, as long as you consider this adulthood. These simple but effective stories resonated with me at such a young age in a way that I will never forget, and those memories I will cherish for the rest of my life. And seeing how the franchise is celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, and the recent very unfortunate passing of Britt Allcroft, I decided it's finally time to follow up on my video about classic Thomas the Tank Engine and talk about the series once again. I debated for a really long time about what I wanted to talk about, because if you thought I covered everything last time, boy do I have news for you. Do I want to talk about the classic series more? Maybe something about the books they were based on. Then past that, there's a shit ton of the show I've never even seen before, because I simply grew out of it, and well, it kinda got shitty. Yeah, this goes without saying, but when I say I enjoy Thomas, I'm not talking about all of it. Any show that goes on for a long time, let alone for 24 seasons, is prone to peter out and start sucking eventually. But in the case of Thomas, I think there's a bit more to the story rather than it just went on too long. So that's a whole other thing. But then there's all these people telling me that there's a small section of the show that got really good for a bit, and I have to check that out too. So I physically stood up and said, fuck it. Let's just talk about all of it. This video is going to be me talking about the whole fucking franchise from beginning to end. I mean, why not? I don't got anything else going on.
Who do I know named Work?
Something to keep in mind is that while this is going to be me talking about the whole franchise as I know it, I'm not going to be able to cover everything. If you really want a thorough breakdown of the entire production history of Thomas, and absolutely everything you could possibly want to know about it, then I recommend the season retrospective videos by the Unlucky Tug. But I'm sure if you like Thomas as an adult like I do, you probably already watch his videos. This man is the reason I know as much about Thomas and his buddies as I do, and he's definitely better at informing you than me. And if you were wondering if I'm going to talk about the All Engines Go reboot, I'm not. Sorry. And when it comes to the movies, there were so damn many of these things that I think I'm going to talk about them all at once another time, with only 2 exceptions.
But with all that said, this has been a long time coming, and it's gonna be a long time running too. I mean, just look at how long I'm gonna be talking about this blue train from the 80s. And it's all because today we are taking a trip to the Island of Sodor to yap about Thomas the Tank Engine and all of his friends. The whole fucking thing. Mostly.
So before Thomas or any of his friends were even a thought in anybody's mind, there was this man, the Reverend Wilbur Awdry, the author of the Railway series. Yeah, you know that thing they mention in every single intro of the series? Yeah, I don't have an excuse for how I didn't know that these were books as a child. That was just kind of dumb. Anyway, these books originally started out as simple bedtime stories for his son, Christopher Awdry, who was sick with measles at the time. They were heavily inspired by Awdry and his previous experiences volunteering on different railways. But seeing the massive potential that they had, both his son and his wife would plead with him to get the stories published, and well, the rest is history. Funny enough, Thomas himself would wouldn't make his first appearance until the second book of the series, aptly titled Thomas the Tank Engine. Yeah, Thomas is far from the main character of the books. In fact, they had to commission more books about Thomas to be made so they had more to pull from for the TV show. He wasn't the main character, but he was certainly the most popular, which is why the TV series gave him the title. The series would center around a group of sentient steam trains who lived on the Island of Sodor and do jobs for their authority figure, Sir Topham Hatt. Or as they call him in the UK, the Fat Controller. You should have seen my fucking face when I watched the UK dub for the first time and found out that that's what they call him. That is crazy work, guys. I was recently gifted the complete collection of the Railway series, and it's given me a chance to finally read these instead of just listening to audio narrations and looking at the illustrations online. I was somebody who already looked at the original series as similar to bedtime stories, and well, would you look at that? The drawings are probably my favorite thing about the books, especially later on when they become way more detailed, look like they were made with watercolors. Now, there are many, too damn many shows and books that center around living vehicles. Hell, I remember my family assuming I was gonna be really into cars because of how much I like Thomas, but no, I never really resonated with it. I think part of the appeal was that they really take the idea of living locomotives to its logical peak. The engines are alive, but they're still steam trains who need to do steam train things. It's been said before, but the whole concept of cars still doesn't make sense to me. It's a world of living cars, but people don't drive the cars are just the people. The fuck's the point of making them cars? Because these books were born from a passion for steam trains, they weren't like that. They were expressly tied to the inner workings of railroads and often were based on real events in railway history, which is something the show after it would also do when they started making their own original stories. I really like the stories that show the perspective a steam train would have on the world. Like, yeah, fishing would be a really weird concept for a living locomotive to wrap their head around. If I was a train, snow would kind of piss me off too. I like that logical consistency. Audrey often said that he believes steam engines had personalities, and that often shows in his writing. And what also helps is being genuinely funny.
"Where's your cowcatcher?" he asked accusingly. "But I don't catch cows, sir." "Don't be funny," snapped the policeman.
I, of course, prefer watching the show because anything that even attempts to form my frontal lobe is getting deterred away from me. But I can totally see myself reading these to my future kids. The TV show Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends was created by Britt Allcroft and David Mitton. These two were really big fans of the Railway series and wanted to adapt his stories for television. This would technically be the third attempt at turning the Railway series into a TV show. The first one was a live broadcast in 1953, being an adaptation of the sad story of Henry. You know, that one that people who never watched the show talk about all the time? That shit got review bombed after it went horribly. I don't know whose idea it was to make it a live event when you're filming with model trains, but of course one ended up derailing and had to be manually put back on the track with a hand. Would you believe Andrew Lloyd Webber wanted to make a 2D animated musical as the second attempt? We have a slightly better look at this one. Oh my god, those fucking noses. What did Matthew Matosis once say?
Look at that. That's reasonable. Then look at this thing. Unreasonable.
And last of all was the pilot that would actually get the series greenlit, which was an adaptation of the story Down the Mine. I mentioned this one in the last video about Thomas as a piece of lost media that I really wanted to see found. And here it is! This was the most random shit ever. I thought that if Mattel was gonna release this pilot, they were gonna wait until it was profitable to do so. Certainly not just release it on YouTube for free, but that's exactly what happened. It is so surreal finally getting to see this footage, and fully restored too. It also goes to show how the direction changed when going to series. Placing the camera lower in the frame makes the engines appear a lot larger and heavier than they actually are. I unfortunately don't remember my first introduction to the world of Thomas. I mainly watched the show through its many home media releases both on DVD and VHS. I still have my original childhood copies, but I unfortunately killed my favorite one trying out my new VCR. Not my smartest decision, but I got another one because of course I did. This is still probably my favorite tape, containing some of my favorite episodes from season 4, my favorite season. There's something about this one more than any of the others that manages to capture the simple beauty of this world. But if I can recommend any DVD to any of you, then make it this 10 Years of Thomas one. Not only does it contain some of the best episodes of the entire show, but there's also a shit ton of extra footage in between. This one hits extra hard for me, because I remember my parents taking me to Edaville Railroad and getting the chance to ride in the real life Thomas. It's funny because this show had a surprising amount of continuity. You are clearly meant to watch all of these in order, but the DVDs would always group episodes from a particular arc, so to speak, and a couple of others together. And I remember always getting really excited when I would finally get to see an episode that was referenced later on.
"Oh," said Toby innocently. "That's why you once needed bootlaces. To be ready, I suppose." "How shall we mend it?" said the conductor. "We'll do it with newspaper and a leather bootlace."
Holy shit, there it is! And the amazing thing about that was coming back years later and watching it all in order and realizing, holy shit, it actually all makes sense. For the most part, some stuff is lost in translation, but nothing so jarring that it would confuse a first-time viewer. And that's where I think it counts. And there are plenty of episodes that I flat out never saw until I was an adult, but I did know about them because of the music videos. Like, I never saw Thomas Comes to Breakfast, but I still saw this crash. My favorite character as a kid was Duncan. I always really liked the characters who were just menaces for no reason.
I'm a plain, blunt engine. I speak as I find. Tunnels should be tunnels and not rabbit holes.
The narrow gauge engines were just my favorites in general. My favorite of the main guys was probably James. Not for any major reason other than I thought he looked cool and I liked the color red. But I was also a pretty big Percy fan because of course I was. He might as well be the main character of the show starting with season 2. Starts making a lot more sense when you realize that Percy was Britt Allcroft's favorite character. I love that. No wonder he got to star in some of the most action-packed episodes and get the best crashes and runaways. He gets more lead roles than Thomas half the time. Britt Allcroft and David Mitton were the backbone of this series. Thomas would simply not be where he is today without the vision of these two minds and how they saw this world in their heads. Britt recognized how big of a brand Thomas could be and how to push it forward, and David Mitton fully realized that vision for the screen. The show's decision to be filmed with model trains on practical sets set it apart from all other kids' programming at the time, and it's the thing that always fascinated me the most about it. I love the way this show looks, but that should go without saying. It's like the illustrations jumped right off the page and came to life. Things would start out very low budget, but even then, they were able to create images that will stick in my head forever. When I was young, I thought they actually filmed everything outside, but I don't think I understood how scale worked. I would always love to pause episodes and take a look around at all the little details scattered around the sets to make everything feel more lived in. They would even get celebrity talent right out of the gate with Ringo Starr, famous from his MS Paint art in this show alone.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor.
I know many aren't a fan of the static faces and the wooden stick people, but I think it's a really clever way to make sure that these model trains can actually emote, and I just really like the wiggling eyes. Although early on, they can be a little wonky. Can somebody give Thomas a smack to fix that? The same goes for the narration. I think not giving every character their own voice once again helped separate Thomas from everything else on the air at the time, and helped keep its ties to the books that they were adapted from. And come on, I gotta talk about the music. Composed by Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell, who I think might be my favorite composers just in general. I don't think this show would even be half as good without the score. And there's one for fucking everything. Every character gets a distinct theme that reflects their personalities perfectly. All the different locations get one, like the watermill or viaduct themes. There's a theme just for the turntable. And it's all just so hummable. I couldn't count the amount of times I'm doing work and the busy station theme is running through my head. All the themes do such a good job being catchy, but still invoking what they were created for. My favorite example is with Percy. His season 1 theme is super energetic, playful, and bouncy, showing how inexperienced and clumsy he can be at this point considering he's new to the railway. But by the time that season 5 rolls around, it's a lot slower, more orchestral and workmanlike, showing that he's become a lot more seasoned, but the grind is a little much for him sometimes and he yearns for more excitement. Even the music itself tells a story. I love that so much. As the series went on, they would get higher budgets, allowing them to add a fuckload of new characters to the cast and crank up the scale and do some really amazing spectacles. I just love how much they always wanted to top themselves and continue to do new and inventive things that they couldn't before. Hearing them talk so passionately about this stuff is so inspiring to me as someone who is influenced so much by their work. They didn't use the fact that they were making something for kids as an excuse to phone it in, and because of that, kids actually liked it. Crazy idea, I know. Especially in the 90s, Thomas was on top of the fucking world. It had broken out of the United Kingdom into every part of the planet. Well, you might be saying, if Thomas was so damn successful, then what happened? Fuck. Season 5 of Thomas and Friends in reality was a testing ground for a potential movie Britt Allcroft wanted to make, and after it was a huge hit, the project would be greenlit. The result is Thomas's first and only film to ever get a theatrical release, and that's because it bombed. Hard. Like, really hard. And while there's certainly a lot to talk about regarding Thomas and the Magic Railroad, it doesn't take a very long viewing to understand why. Both audiences and critics were scratching their heads until their scalps were bleeding. And it's not even just that it didn't make any money. It had an irreversible effect on the way people viewed this franchise in a way that it never fully recovered from, if you ask me. Not to be dramatic, but I think you could trace almost everything bad that would come from this show back to this movie. I'm pretty sure I watched this movie as a kid, but I think I chalked it up to a fever dream at the time. It confused the hell out of me. It was so different from what I was used to. Oh, so there's regular ass people now? Magic and gold dust? Matilda? Now, it should be said that there was a lot of studio interference during this movie's production, if that wasn't obvious already. And hey, I'm all for somebody getting to make their passion project without the need for meddling. But I'll be honest, going off of what Britt has said about it and an early work print that got leaked, I don't think this movie would have been that much better if it hadn't gotten changed. Even if you're not familiar with the original show at all, you can tell what's wrong here. The engines, that I'm sure every kid wanted to go see the movie for, really aren't main players in this story at all. We just kind of cut to them to remind us that we did in fact walk into the right theater. Yeah, Thomas is not the main character, despite the title being Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Instead, everything is led by Mr. Conductor, played by Alec Baldwin. Now, who the fuck is Mr. Conductor, and why is there a magical 3-foot-tall man here? Well, that's gonna require me to let you in on a completely different show called Shining Time Station. And I know what you're thinking. Chase, what the fuck is is this? This is Thomas's first ever appearance in the States. Thomas and Friends episodes were only 4.5 minutes long, which made it hard to fit into America's half-hour television time slots when brought over. So they made an entirely different show to get around that. It was about a couple of kids in a train station who get visited by Mr. Conductor, at first being played by Ringo Starr, but after his departure, he would then be replaced by famous comedian George Carlin. He would tell the kids a story to teach them some kind of lesson, which would be the episodes of Thomas. Carlin would even redub the first 2 seasons and be the narrator for the next 2. That's amazing. That means I have Shining Time Station to thank for giving me the greatest combination in history, that being George Carlin and Thomas the Tank Engine. And it's also allowed other people to do things like this.
The station master was furious.
Get the fuck out of here,
He said.
And yeah, I approve. Here's the thing though, I never saw this show as a kid. Like I said, I watched Thomas exclusively through home media, and even then, Shining Time Station was canceled in 1996. You know who else never saw Shining Time Station? The UK. You know, the region the series came from. So if you were a kid in the United Kingdom, you were just as confused as I was. This is really the aspect of Magic Railroad that continues to baffle me. And part of me feels bad for making fun of it because I know this was Britt Allcroft's vision and what she wanted. But to me, it's just so far removed from what I think is the core appeal of Thomas, and that's fucking trains. Like, if this was supposed to get people interested in the brand, I don't think it does a very good job at that. This is not what the show is like at all. I know it's been said before, but I really don't like the idea that Sodor is this magical realm separate from the real world. I think the reason this island was so memorable is because it felt like a real place that was just out there somewhere. Also, if this is supposed to be a magical world away from my own, you're not really selling me on wanting to go there. Like, Sodor is cool when you think of it as just an island, but this is a magical realm separate from ours, and the only difference is that the trains talk? How does that benefit me? So if I'm not on a railway, is everything normal? Or is there a Minecraft-style barrier? I think everybody else is still implied to be stick people because we never see any other humans outside of the ones from our world, and Sir Topham Hatt's wife is apparently still a stick figure, and I refuse to believe that she's the only one. But I'm gonna need to back up for a second because I can't even begin to explain how needlessly confusing this movie is on its own, too. No fucking wonder I couldn't follow the plot as a kid. I can barely do it as an adult. There's like 5 different plot lines going on that have nothing to do with each other until like the last 10 minutes. Mr. Conductor and his stoner cousin Junior go on a really convoluted adventure to find the source of gold dust.
Paradise. I just got on cloud 9 and here I am.
There's this guy who has a steam engine named Lady that doesn't work anymore, and being sad about it is his whole thing. There's his granddaughter, played by Mara Wilson, who listens to dogs for what trains she's supposed to catch. There's the grandson, who also talks to dogs. I guess that's just normal in this universe.
Shining Time is the best welcome sign of any town in our valley. Well, I'm glad you agree.
Diesel 10 is trying to find Lady and destroy her because he's evil, and not really much more to it than that. All the engines, who mostly just sit around and tell us the same shit we already know. And all of that is excluding the other villain plotline that was cut because kids found him too scary. I just don't understand why everything is so complicated. Thomas is such a simple show. The episodes are 4 minutes long. There's just so much shit going on, and it never really comes together in a natural way. But okay, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen or anything. In fact, let's go through some of the stuff I actually enjoy. The obvious one being the visuals. Everything is very pretty. I kind of wish we got to see more locations on Sodor other than grassy countryside, but everything is extremely colorful and nice on the eyes. I also really like Diesel 10. He's super out of place in this world for sure, and I remember he kind of creeped me out as a kid because of his claw, Pinchy. But he's the only life in this movie. You can tell the actor is having a ball with this role, and anytime he's on screen, I'm having a good time.
Pinchy, you've captured the real me. I mean, that's beautiful. I could cry.
The best thing about this movie, though, is the music, composed by Hummy Man. He took a handful of the original themes and did magical things with it. Still has my favorite version of Really Useful Engine. Thomas and the Magic Railroad on its own is a pretty harmless children's movie. I don't think many kids today would enjoy it that much, though. I didn't. But I can maybe see some kids at the time getting caught up in it when the show is in its prime. There are definitely still some things to admire, but for Thomas, its failure would leave a permanent stain on the show's legacy, and would lead to bad things happening to the show itself. After Magic Railroad's failure, Britt Allcroft and David Mitton would be involved in 2 more seasons of Thomas and Friends, where they pretty much tried to pretend like nothing happened. All the shit the movie tried to do? Gone. We are back to the same old, thank fucking God. But remember, things were still never the same. While seasons 6 and 7 are part of the classic series as they bear the original opening and music, I've heard many refer to these 2 seasons as the Ghislaine era, naming it after the company that Britt Allcroft would turn into. I like to call it the transition era, mostly because while things aren't bad just yet, We're certainly heading there. This is when they would bring on a team of writers as opposed to Britt and David doing all the scripts themselves. And unfortunately, I think you can really tell. The direction is still good and always the music, at least when you live in the UK. We'll get to that. But things are simpler, like even more than before, often telling us the same information we already know a lot. Considering they don't really do continuity in between episodes anymore, it makes it even more obvious. It's a bit more happy-go-lucky if that's any way to describe it. They aren't really trying to create impressive set pieces or really wow the audience anymore. I know if you keep building and building, you'll eventually have nowhere to go, but it makes everything feel a bit more smaller. This isn't like season 5 where they built entire sets with the intent of doing something crazy on them, and all the characters personality-wise are pretty much back to how they were at the start of the show with only a few exceptions, but that always happens in a long-running show eventually. And I don't know if it's just me, but I find most of the crashes around this time to be kind of gimmicky. Percy flies through an entire factory and they only focus on the fact that he has chocolate on him. Like, that probably killed people. My ass, no one was hurt. Also, someone pointed this out to me, so now all of you have to suffer too. There's one episode where every time Alec Baldwin says coal cars, he says it the exact same way every time because it's the same audio clip being used over and over again.
One by one, he shunted his coal cars onto the tipper's loading ramp with coal cars in front of him and coal cars behind. He bumped into the coal cars, and the coal cars bumped into Percy.
I know the fact that it had to be pointed out shows that it wasn't that bad to begin with, but now I can't unhear it. I wouldn't call these seasons bad still. Most of the stories and characters are still pretty solid. This is when they introduced Salty to the cast, and he's one of my favorite characters.
We heaved until the old freighter finally caught the tide.
Thomas and the Jet Engine is a really fun episode, and I really enjoy how the final episode of the classic era, 3 Cheers for Thomas, is about Thomas and Birdie finally having another race, where Birdie finally gets to win and shows how far Thomas has come since season 1 that he doesn't really care if he loses. UK release even uses a remix of the Let's Have a Race song, and I think that's a great touch. But this would effectively end the classic era, as during the production of season 7, Ghislaine would go under thanks to Magic Railroad and force them to sell the rights to a company called Hit Entertainment, ushering in what many like to call the Hit era. This is when the series would be rebranded as simply Thomas and Friends instead of the longer version. But to be fair, Thomas and Friends is a lot easier to say, even if it doesn't give me an idea what the show is about. Hit Entertainment would take the series and remodel it to be really fucking boring. When regular people think about Thomas, this is what they're thinking of. Watered down, generic, formulaic, like they think kids are morons and they don't have to try. The very thing that Britt and David didn't want their show to be like. These 4-minute Thomas episodes have never been philosophical masterpieces, but they always at the very least try to be well thought out and engaging to watch. You know, tell a simple story and maybe something to take from it. That's really all it is. So what's the problem now? I mean, on the surface, it looks kind of the same. Well, they took a really simple show and made it even simpler. Most of the fun extended cast is limited to the main 7, which usually equates to Thomas getting most of the leads and the others fighting for the top spot. It became a mandated thing. He had to at least appear in every episode. And most of the time they have him learn the same morals. At least when they taught the same morals in the classic era, they did it with new characters. And the second thing is the pacing. There is so much more fluff. The 4.5-minute runtime was short, but it meant that something was always happening, and they made that time count. They were always making the best use of their limitations. Plots are far more simplistic, but have a longer runtime. Remember when you would begin an episode and the plot would immediately start? You fucking wish now. I swear to God, if I have to hear the engines like working on Sir Topham Hatt's railway, or it was a busy time on the Island of Sodor one more time as an opening to an episode, it's always busy on this railway. When is it not? This is also where Michael Brandon would replace Alec Baldwin as the narrator, and
how am I going to make the Children's Day really special? He said to Rusty.
He's not my favorite. As a kid, I used to imagine the narrator as an older figure who maybe worked on the railway in his younger years and was telling you these stories from his youth to teach you something. Brandon sounds like a teacher who wants you to stop sticking your finger in your ass. Sometimes I don't mind him, it depends on the episode, but even then, some of his voices just don't fit.
Could you help me up the hill? Puffed Sir Handel.
Of course I can,
Pete Peter Sam.
And if all of that wasn't bad enough, they did the worst thing ever, and that's replace the original composers Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. They didn't even remix the old themes. I would understand that. No, they just threw them all out and made new ones. Fucking why? What was wrong with the classic music? Most TV shows dream of having a theme song so widely catchy and well known, one you can recognize from the first few notes. There's a handful of themes I enjoy from the hit era, but most of it sounds like a farting subwoofer. I always used to think that season 7 was part of the hit era because the US versions of these episodes never used the original scores and had Michael Brandon narrating. And listen, I know you're thinking it's stupid for me to get angry about a show meant for 6-year-olds. First of all, Yeah. Second of all, even when I was a small child, I could tell the difference between these two eras. There's a reason I always look forward to going to my meme's house and watching the tapes of the early seasons rather than watching the new stuff at home, because I liked them way more. They were way more exciting, more engaging, stuff actually happened in them. I took more from them. The newer seasons I only watched if they were on TV, and even then I remember watching it thinking,
are you saying I'm stupid?
I guess if you look at it objectively, it's not that bad. Pretty inoffensive, but that's just it. Thomas used to not be content with only being inoffensive. It took risks. It challenged kids, told endearing stories. That's not nothing. It's not all terrible. There's 1 or 2 episodes I enjoy, but overall, this era just feels like Thomas with half the effort. It's kind of there, but not really. And then came the decision that would effectively kill any sort of interest I had in the series going forward. Thomas would start tinkering with CGI. They wouldn't fully jump in, as Season 12 would be a hybrid, still using models on sets, but also implementing CGI for the faces and people. Yeah, I hate this. It just looks so unnatural, especially with the narrator still voicing everybody.
Skarloey's boiler bubbled with excitement. Watch out, they're heavy.
It's also super inconsistent. Sometimes they have the regular static model phases, but then they switch shots and it's fully animated. It just never becomes seamless. And I feel like how bad it looked was part of the reason they decided to scrap the plan to use this style for more seasons and just go fully animated. Thomas being filmed with models was always part of its appeal for me. So to see that completely gone just felt wrong. And to be honest, I still think Thomas is always going to be better with models on sets. That's never gonna change. You don't get that same, wow, they really did that in front of a camera? They really blew up that shed? That bridge really collapsed like that? That wow factor just isn't there. And if they wanted to win me back with the writing...
Until he saw the birthday parcel.
Wobbling wheels! It's all crinkled and crumpled. What am I going to do?
So imagine that, but like every episode.
It's the worst of what I didn't like about the hit era, but like twofold. Every episode is about Thomas having a special job where he needs to transport something on a flatbed that should probably be taken by any other mode of transportation. There's an episode where they have to deliver a balloon that's already inflated. They fuck this up twice, and each time they don't think to just inflate it when they get there. This direction is also just so uninspired. They continuously use the same angles over and over and over, and holy shit, just move the camera. Just do anything else, please. And it pisses me off because I know this animation can look good. Once in a while, they put in like 2% more effort and it's night and day. I still don't really enjoy the previous era, but I can at least find 1 or 2 episodes that I can say I like. Here... And it sucks because the movie that started the CGI shift, Hero the Rails, wasn't even that bad. I mean, it wasn't amazing, but it was surprisingly enjoyable as someone who didn't even like the CGI era. It helped that the first time I watched it was through a toy recreation. If you asked an AI to write Thomas episodes, I think the writing quality of this era wouldn't be very far off. I won't talk shit about the team themselves too much. I understand they weren't dealt the best hand in a lot of places. And this era especially had some pretty strict time crunch as there had to be a new season every year. That's a lot even for Thomas. Honestly, rushed might be the best way to describe these past 2 eras. It's just obvious they were never given the proper amount of time that the classic series had. It used to take them years to make this shit, and they wanted both a new season and a movie tie-in annually. This was definitely not the fault of the staff, but I still get sad seeing less effort go into this series considering that's what made it stand out in the first place. Thomas was just a lot more corporate at this point. I mean, it was before, but at least the people in charge cared. That kind of thing wouldn't come around again until around 2012. Thomas would finally see some hope as Hit Entertainment would go bankrupt and would sell the rights to Thomas to Mattel, who have owned it ever since. Now, this would spell disaster later on, unfortunately, but at the time of the buyout, this was amazing news for the franchise as they would gain a new head writer by the name of Andrew Brenner. Brenner had already had some experience writing Thomas stories as he wrote several magazine stories that got adapted into episodes for the classic series. Many of those episodes I included in my top 10. This is a man who knows how to write a Thomas episode. I never actually sat down and watched any episodes from this era because it was CGI. What did I care? But so many people have told me that this era actually had some effort put into it, and at the very least was worth checking out just for fun. And now that I've seen it, it's true. As soon as Brenner took over, things got substantially better. I wouldn't call it the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's pretty close. You can immediately tell the difference in animation. Not only does it get more colorful and lively as the seasons go on, but they also get more creative with camera angles and movement. The show automatically becomes more engaging to watch simply from it being more dynamically shot. Of course, I still think filming with models is always going to be better for this, but if Thomas had to be animated, I think I can live with this. this. I'll give them that they actually used CGI to do stuff that they couldn't with the props, like having the people be more important part of stories. Before, if you wanted them to do anything but stand there and talk, you were kinda out of luck. If I had to nitpick, I think some of the environments are still a little bare. Just a tad too much empty space that I think could have been used to make this world feel more dense and real. And I find the voice acting overall to be a little hit or miss. I started watching the US dub because that's what I'm used to, but I'll tell you now that the UK dub is probably the better option. Some of them I don't mind at all. I think Thomas, Gordon, Duck, and Salty all fit their respective characters really well. Even if Gordon, Sir Topham Hatt basically have the same voice. And I do prefer Edward's voice in the UK dub because he sounds older and I think that just fits him more. But then you have characters like Henry.
And chickens! You take the train, Thomas! You like pulling trains!
Yeah, no. Also, am I the only one who thinks that Percy's CGI face looks nothing like his model ones? I don't think I'll ever get over that. But let's talk about some of the episodes themselves. While watching, I made sure to write down the ones that stood out the most to me. I won't lie, some were better than others. They don't really play with tone or scale anymore, and that's the biggest reason why the classic era shall reign supreme. Some see a show delving into so many different tones as a bad thing, but I think it's something more shows should embrace, especially when it's a collection of different stories. How are you ever gonna find your comfort zone if you don't push past it every once in a while? I guess that's what the movies are for now, but I haven't gotten that far yet. I also think that the show has lost its cynical edge. I know a lot of people think that Thomas is too mean for kids, but that's kind of what I liked about it. Part of the joke was always that all the characters are assholes, and they have to learn how not to be assholes. Trust me, karma works overtime in this universe. If you even glance at somebody the wrong way, you better watch the fuck out. And I can't help it. I just really like watching them all roast the shit out of each other. It feels more real that way.
Here's your freight train, James, said Thomas. Have you got some bootlaces ready? And he ran off laughing.
But I think what really shines in this era is character writing and dynamics. They actually give time to characters who aren't Thomas. And some like Annie and Clarabelle or Toad the Brake Van are given much more significance in stories just from having a voice. Toad even gets some episodes all to himself, and they're actually really good. Old Reliable Edward feels like an episode straight out of the classic era. Mostly because it's very similar to an existing classic series episode, but I actually like this version a lot more. Mostly because it makes Edward the main character of his own story, unlike the original. And I love how much Thomas is a schemer in this. I like it when he's not just the child stand-in. The Duncan episodes were something I didn't know I needed in my life. I'm just happy they even still care about these little engines even so many years later. There's one about Duncan trying not to be a grump for the whole day to get a new coat of paint he wants, but in the end, everybody else learns that it's simply how he expresses himself. And another where he tries everything to make this one grumpy passenger happy, and he does, pissing everybody else off in the process. I think it's an effective, you can't please everyone kind of story. Considering how much I love the narrow gauge engines, and that Duncan was my childhood favorite, these just made the inner child in me happy, and I find their stories very well told. Springtime for Diesel. This one really surprised me. I'll be honest, I've never really been a big fan of Diesel in anything but his first appearance in season 2. He's the bully character, but considering everybody else has already got those traits, his version isn't about gloating or teasing. He already thinks he's better than everyone without even having to meet them, and he will fuck them all over just to get what he wants. Ever since then, he's a lot more generic, usually just saying mean things because he's mean. This one actually gives him more of a motive and attempts to actually do something with him. He's being an asshole like always until he bumps into Daisy so hard she's in disrepair, and he actually feels guilty hearing that she may never run again. And I like seeing him increasingly feel that guilt until he confronts her while thinking that she can't hear him. And it's a seriously human moment in a show about talking trains.
But I hope you can be fixed. I wish I could do something to make everything all right again.
And then afterwards, she tells him that the thought is nice, but he's gonna have to actually do something if he wants things to be different. And I really like that lesson. Daisy overall gets a surprisingly large amount of focus in this era. She was always a character they forgot to do anything with, but I really enjoy her dynamic here with one of the new characters, Ryan, that she shares a branch line with now. She's so mean to him, but he's so gullible and naive that it never really gets to him. I just like Ryan in general too. Not only because I think he looks really cool, but I think he fits rather well into this cast. He feels like he could have easily been a character here since the beginning. And also this moment really made me laugh.
Arriving to stage a son et lumière, as they call it du continent, as a special treat for all the tourists.
Very good, Daisy. Yes. That engine. I have no idea what she was talking about.
Connor and Caitlin are also new characters that I found interesting. These two streamline engines are really out of place compared to everybody else, but I don't really care that much at this point. I'm just glad to see something we haven't seen before. It's nice to see these big, fast engines that don't just think they're better than everybody else. There's a nice episode about Connor becoming paranoid about breaking down after his coupling rod snapped. So one of the older engines, Steven, tells him that his old friends fucking exploded.
We had parts snap off and bits come loose. Some engines I work with even exploded! Kapow!
And that actually works!
Did those engines you worked with really put themselves back together after they exploded?
Don't be silly, Thomas. I made that bit up.
And you know I love a good Christmas special. Something sorely missing throughout the years now that I look back. Especially that time they turned one of them into a Thanksgiving episode. Yeah, I don't get it either. But we get some good ones here. Last Train for Christmas was my favorite. Not only because it has both Connor and Hero, another one of my favorites from this era, but I also like the continuity from earlier in the season by bringing back the slip coaches. Holy shit, they didn't just forget about something as soon as they introduced it? Am I on the Island of Sodor or the Twilight Zone? And come on, you know I have to include the Arlesdale engine episodes. Tit for Tat is officially the first episode to be an adaptation of the original Railway series stories since season 4. That is crazy, but it's amazing to see. It's the kind of thing only longtime fans would get a kick out of, and I really appreciate that. In the original story, Wilbur Awdry comes to the island to take pictures of the engines for the books he's writing, and it's the same here, but a little updated, and I just think it's so cute.
They're even gonna write about me in a book and show me off in moving pictures on the television too.
Don't be silly. That's never gonna happen.
He must be having you on.
But it did happen, didn't it?
But there's one thing that I've already seen that, if you ask me, is the best thing to come out of this era. In 2015, for the franchise's 70th anniversary, there was The Adventure Begins, retelling the events of the first few Railway series books and subsequently those original episodes in the CGI style. In some ways, it's actually more faithful to the books than the classic episodes, like James originally being painted in black before his crash, and having Edward and Gordon take place before Thomas's arc. But I also really like how they use the medium to make these stories their own. There's a lot here that they simply couldn't do before. Thomas doesn't just witness James in his runaway, he chases him down in an effort to save him. The voices give them more of a chance to have these moments that were previously a few lines of narration be full conversations. And holy shit, why has it taken them so long to use the original Mike and Jr. themes again? Makes me wish they used just a few for the main show, but you know what, I'll still take it. Not everything about it is my favorite. I think the biggest difference between this and the original is Thomas himself. Both in the books and the TV show, he's an asshole.
If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then? Run my train on time, for one thing, retorted Thomas.
Like with a lot of the other characters, is something he has to learn to get better with. I think it's why he's the most popular character. Kids are assholes. It's one of the only times you're technically allowed to be. But they also show him messing up and getting laughed at for good measure. That behavior isn't really rewarded. The new version showcases a much more marketable Thomas, one that's a lot nicer and more friendly. You know, something you would expect the main character of a kid's show to be. Usually in the show, I don't mind this because I just see it as, well, all those stories are in the future. He grew out of it. But considering this is supposed to be his origin story and the start of his arc, it kind of feels weird that he's not a dick. It means that he doesn't really change that much over the course of the story, which is something I think the previous iterations did really well. His arc is more about fitting in and learning to be patient, and who's gonna tell him how many times he's gonna have to learn that again? There's a similar problem with Henry. He does not feel like the same character whatsoever, but that's more of an issue with the whole show at this point. They made him into a scaredy cat, I'm guessing to give him a single trait they could focus on. But it does kind of muddy the original story a bit. Why would Sir Topham Hatt punish Henry for being frightened of rain? I know that's what the original line in the book was, but I don't think it was supposed to be taken that literally. He did it because he was being selfish and would rather not get his paint wet than get his passengers home safely. That's what the lesson of the story was. But these problems really only come up when you directly compare this to what came before. On its own, The Adventure Begins is one giant love letter to the franchise in these original book stories. It takes a lot of liberties, but I'm kind of glad they did. I wouldn't want it to be exactly the same as what we had already seen. This is a way that these stories could reach a new audience, and there's something to actually talk about. CGI Thomas has had its ups and downs, but the movie is one thing that I think really makes it worth it in my eyes. Like, I'm glad at the very least this could come out of all the suffering that the series has been through.
And that's it, right? Ending on a high note? Yeah, roll those credits. Please no more.
Thomas, while still doing much better from a quality standpoint, wasn't in terms of ratings. I mean, they were on their 21st season. I feel like that was the main contributor. People who still had nostalgia for the old seasons were much older at this point. And while they did get some people back with the callbacks, it was failing to resonate with modern kids, so something had to change. Their new way of bringing life to the brand would involve taking Thomas around the world, believing that seeing Thomas in these foreign countries would help the brand reach those places. This new era would become known as Big World, Big Adventures. Or as I like to call it, Why We Can't Have Nice most things. There's a lot you can say about the later hit seasons, but one thing is still true. This is still Thomas. It's shitty, watered down Thomas, but it's the same idea. This is trying to make Thomas into something that it's not. So in short, the series would see another rebrand. Thomas, on top of being the narrator, is now on a big adventure around the world, traveling all over the globe. Why? I don't know, they never tell us. To be honest, I don't even think this idea is inherently bad. I mean, real famous engines are taken around the world all the time for events and shit. Hell, it's already happened in the show. There is so much you could have done with this idea if you even cared half as much. It could have been a really cool way to teach kids about other cultures if you did more than 5 minutes of research. Could have brought in writers who are actually from those countries, but hey, you know, what do I know? Instead, they showcase some of the most surface level and stereotypical white people knowledge about these countries. There's pandas in China? Call an ambulance! Do I even need to mention this scene that had to be removed from the movie?
I follow the sun.
Oh, I see. A sun worshipper. We used to have proper sun worshippers in Mexico. And you know what their faces look like? This.
Yeah, you guys should not be talking about other cultures, sorry. All the new characters Thomas meets could have been cool if they actually got their own episode plots to themselves, but all of these stories are about Thomas, not them. If you pointed a gun at my head and told me to name any of these guys outside of Nia, you would have to shoot me. Not all the episodes take place in other countries, thankfully. There are plenty which are pretty standard episodes of Thomas. You could tell these were the ones that were left over from when the show was good. I'm really starting to notice that all the funniest moments in CGI come from Duck.
Gordon? No! Right.
And you know what? The new theme song is kind of catchy. I'm just not happy about it. But despite that, there's still a bunch of things that are distracting. There's now all these weird imagination sequences, which pretty much just give them an excuse to have the characters not be trains for a minute. Because, you know, they really hate that.
Monkey!
I also really hate the way they all bob around while they talk now. I know it's to make them more expressive, but it makes them all look weightless. These are supposed to be machines that weigh several tons and they just effortlessly swing around. Maybe if they toned it down by like 80%, it would look better, but they just went super overboard with it. I also hope whatever's in those trucks isn't fragile. Another part of the rebrand was introducing new main characters that would make the series more gender inclusive. And I know there's plenty of people who are against this from that idea alone. Listen, I'm not gonna act like Thomas is a very gender balanced show. It never has. There are female characters, but that's still like a 1:15 ratio. So I'm fine with this. I don't really know why they felt the need to get rid of Edward and Henry, two characters who have literally been around since the first book. What, you're gonna tell me after having 40 different characters that just 2 more was too much to handle? You could have very easily had both. I am glad they're still using most of the extended cast, even some of the more forgotten ones like Jack in the Pack. Fuck, I forgot about Jack in the Pack! Maybe another time. It doesn't feel like a lot of thought went into Nia's character outside of her design. Everything about her is just told to us, not actually shown through anything she does. She wants to be a really useful engine? Well, thank God, because I was beginning to think that they would never have someone who wanted that. There's an episode that I thought might make me learn more about her when she can't read the station numbers, but it just evolves into teaching kids how to read numbers. And Rebecca is a pretty standard Thomas character. I like the idea of her being another express engine to be a foil to Gordon and Flying Scotsman, but like Nia, I don't really feel like she has any personality traits that make her stand out from everybody else. All the changes just make me so curious about what younger me would have thought about the show being like this. I mean, I thought this was a big change from what I liked, but this is on a whole other planet, literally. But I can also see why it wasn't really resonating with modern kids either. I feel like Thomas being a slower, more down-to-earth show is what made it stand out. You look at so many other programs for kids and they're very loud, zany, and cartoonish. Thomas was going up against Thundercats at the time. So when you just try to chase what works for other shows, you're getting away from what people liked about it in the first place. Long story short, Big World Big Adventures didn't go over very well. It lasted about 3 seasons before Mattel finally decided to pull the plug, and in its place came All Engines Go, a complete reboot aimed at a completely different audience and medium. A lot of people really hate this show. It's kind of like the Teen Titans Go of Thomas the Tank Engine. But similarly to Teen Titans Go, just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't understand that it's not meant for me. I said I wasn't covering this, and I'm not. I haven't seen a single episode, and I don't really plan on watching it. I don't need to. But I would be lying if I said the idea that the old format was seen as not good enough anymore didn't make me a little sad. I know it's harder with the Cocomelon attention spans of kids today, but that's just more of a reason to give them more quality stories that grab their attention. They really said if we can't beat them, join them. But at least one comfort that I'll always have is that no matter how bad this show gets, I'll always have these first couple of simple childhood seasons to fall back on. I can't help it. These stories are just comforting in a way that I don't think any other show is going to be able to capture. At least I don't think so. We haven't gotten there yet. And I do think that there's something to be we learned from all this. And it's that just because something is made for kids doesn't mean it doesn't deserve your time and attention. This series fell because the people making it didn't give a fuck about what they were making. They saw Thomas as a brand and nothing more. It succeeded the most when people who did care were at the helm. These stories don't stick in our brains because, oh my god, it's just so marketable. It's because they're well written. They capture our sense of imagination and inspire us. And that's something that can be done again with the right people for children today. And I really hope that future generations will have stories that stick with them through their lives like what this little blue tank engine has done for me. Rest in peace, Britt Allcroft and David Mitton. Thanks for the magic.
And that was the story of how Chase realized that he really liked talking about media he enjoyed, but still never realizing how much people did not want to hear the stupid, nerdy shit he had to say. Fatty.
Oh, okay, I don't have to listen to this.
Wait, what? You can do that? Hello? Hello?
Thank God. Ugh. I mean, but seriously though, who needs a disembodied voice telling them that they suck all the time? That's what my own brain is for. Ugh, anyway, I have a feeling that this is gonna taste cheesy.
Chase wasn't very articulate, also didn't have very good hand-eye coordination.
Oh, I got mustard in my corneas! Oh, where's the sink?
Did I mention his sense of direction sucked too?
And yeah, that's why I couldn't come into work today. Hello?
And that's when Chase realized that Thomas the Tank Engine may have taught him many things, but one thing it never taught was how to make money.